Good morning. It was a video propaganda video about the progressive school, the activity school, the laboratory school that John Dewey started in the University of Chicago. The focus today will be on John Dewey and his impact on education. Of course, he wasn't alone. As we've seen with practically everyone we've talked about, there's like a whole network of people that are all involved in the movement that the individuals we've highlighted are kind of the icons for, right? I'm sure there are some who were significant, that the movement wouldn't have happened without them. But John Dewey is a pragmatist, again, the same as Charles Sanders Peirce and William James that we talked about, although he referred to his philosophy as instrumentalism. And what he meant by that was that knowledge is an instrument. The birth of John Dewey was 1859, the year 1859, died in 1952, so he's, I think, the longest lived philosopher we've looked at so far. Even older than Thomas Hobbes, 92. Wasn't Hobbes 91? Anyone remember? It was close, I suppose. And the other one that I think of that really lived a long time is Bertrand Russell, who we'll talk about when we talk about Wittgenstein. We really should focus on Russell more too, but we can't talk about all of them. Dewey grew up in Vermont, and the first college he went to was Middlebury College. He was influenced by a Hegelian professor there, and was considered a Hegelian himself. Odd sort of thing. He wanted to go on to university to become a philosophy professor, and a lot of his friends pointed out to him, you can't become a philosophy professor unless you're also a theologian. And yet he had no interest in being a theologian, but he did go on to Johns Hopkins University. And by the way, one of the lecturers there at the time was Charles Sanders Peirce. So if you're looking for the connection between John Dewey and pragmatism, the connection was clearly Charles Sanders Peirce, who, remember, he was the founder of pragmatism. In fact, when he first coined the phrase pragmatism, and then William James started using it. Oh, I'm going to have a hard time finding where that was. Let's see. Here we go. So when Peirce first named pragmatism, remember he gave it the meaning is the connection between action and experience. So it was a theory of the semiotic, or the meaning of signs. But once he named it pragmatism, James started using it and promoting it, and the way James was promoting it was quite different, really. James was popularizing it and using it as a theory of truth, and basically arguing that what's true is what works in practice. So if you're looking at a statement and you're trying to figure out what's the import of that statement, if it's true for you, it's that it works in practice. Whatever it says actually is a good idea, basically. And following that, Peirce changed his word for pragmatism to Pragmaticism to differentiate himself from William James. And remember, Dewey referred to his as Instrumentalism. Looking at Dewey, born 1859, died 1952, born in Burlington, Vermont. He got his BA from the University of Vermont, his PhD from Johns Hopkins University. And despite what everyone warned him, that he was only going to be able to get a job teaching philosophy if he had a theology degree and was a minister, basically. And by the way, even when I went to Westchester, the chair of my department, Professor Claghorn, was a Presbyterian minister. The ethics teacher that I had for most of my ethics classes, including my graduate program, was an Episcopalian minister. I believe we also had another Presbyterian, Dr. Struckmeyer. So it was still something that a lot of people thought was important, was that if you're teaching philosophy, you're also going to be associated with theology. And a lot of universities, the philosophy department includes the Department of Religion or the Department of Theology, depending on what they call it. So there's definitely that kind of connection. But immediately after graduating with his degree from Johns Hopkins, he went on and got a job teaching at the University of Michigan. Notice he was there for 4 years, and then he was offered a kind of a promotion, increase in income and so on, at the University of Minnesota. So he left to the University of Minnesota. He was only there for a year, though, when the chair of the department that he had been at in Michigan had died, and they offered him the chair. So he returned to Michigan. He was there until '94, when he got a position at the University of Chicago. The University of Chicago is where he developed the activity school as part of the philosophy department, which is kind of interesting. But if we think about what's the deal, why is education an issue for him as a Hegelian? And he did eventually change his vocabulary, because as you can imagine, the Hegelian vocabulary wasn't very popular in the United States. It wasn't an easy to grasp vocabulary. So he changed the vocabulary and called things like organicism and so on. And as I'm thinking about the vocabulary he changed it to, it didn't really catch on either. So it didn't really work. But he definitely had the impact, and Hegel continued to have an impact. But the theory of inquiry is a focus for John Dewey. That's the title of one of his books, Logic, the Theory of Inquiry. Let's do this. See if I can just... And How We Think, another book. If you're teaching children how to think, and the typical school, which if you were here earlier, I started that video, I guess it was about 25 after, but that's when I found it. And I like it because the music is so cute, dun, 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 with the little kids. It's fun. But in any case, the theory had been, and the way the schools were in the United States, and they were really pushing schools. Horace Mann. I've got to keep those two individuals. Thomas Mann was an author in Germany. Horace Mann was a educator in Massachusetts, and he's the one that started the Board of Education and other aspects of our educational system. But the schools that were primarily developed were one school one room schoolhouses where all the kids from the town went, no matter what their age. They're all in there. And as you saw, the teachers just trying to teach them by rote, memorizing the times tables, memorizing the capitals of the states, and using a ruler all the time and slapping it at a board of education. So the thought was that school was teaching facts, teaching things that you had to memorize, and what Dewey thought, considering Hegel's philosophy, what happens is this dialectical process. How do things develop? You go through this situation, the antithesis, the synthesis, keep doing that. Well, that's how education really goes, and you should really incorporate that into your education. So what you need to do really to inspire children, instead of just trying to get them to memorize spelling and tables and things like that, is give them activities that teach them stuff. And how do you do that? You give them a problem, and the theory of inquiry basically lots of different ways. Shoot, that doesn't look very good. Maybe this. That's not working. Nope. Well, here's a better one. It's going to be more detailed, but we could use this. Cultural naturalism. I remember the one word was organicism. Never picked up cultural naturalism. I don't know that people use that expression ever either. But what we do when we're trying to teach the theory of inquiry is we give the students a problem. And you might have like a team that's working on this. So you give the students a problem, and the first thing they have to do is analyze the problem, figure out what the problem is, define the problem, right? And then they have to come up with a hypothesis of how to solve the problem. Once they have that hypothesis, then they go ahead and they test the hypothesis to see if it works. If it works, yay for us, we've solved the problem. If it doesn't, well, then we have to go back to square one, redefine the problem, see if we missed something, and then come up with a new hypothesis and try again, right? So this is the theory of inquiry. The approach probably that you studied in grammar school, you probably had a science project, maybe a math project. I know that's how the school district here, I remember being a judge in several grammar school projects, where they have the posters and things that you all have to come and praise the children for all their efforts and so on. So that's the approach that Dewey said the school should take that. Now, part of the problem, though, with doing that is that you also have to segregate the students by abilities, and that's usually age. So one of the effects of this was that it started to change schools so that they needed schools for each age group or ability group, and the teachers had to be at have better training so that they could actually work with that specific group of kids. Plus, they also needed to know a certain amount of child psychology so that they knew what kind of problems a particular group of kids could actually solve. You don't want to give them a problem like, is anything faster than the speed of light? That would not be something that a group of fifth graders could solve, right? So you have to know what kind of problem is age appropriate and give them that kind of problem. And you imagine that's going to require teacher training. So this is a more expensive way of doing things. And by the way, a lot of people rebelled against schools adapting this progressive educational method because they thought it was actually going to ruin the kids. Instead of teaching them the great books, the great books. There's probably a list. I don't know if you used to go to Tidal Wave years ago. I remember when Tidal Wave was on Fireweed before it moved over to the little mall where it is now, and it just had kind of this one building all to itself, including the basement, the main